Holy shit, it's time for a real Nintendo game. And what's more Nintendo than Smash? As a lover of video games, the first game I ever played was created by none other than Namco. It was Namco. I played Pac-Man. I only have vague memories of it as I was quite young. I then went on to play the Atari 2600, including the infamously bad 2600 version of Pac-Man. Also E.T. No shit, I had E.T. as a child. I had some good stuff too, like Asteroids, so don't cry for me. I was 3 and more interested in playing outside or watching cartoons. No, my true obsession for video games didn't begin until I first played Super Mario Bros. For the NES. From that point forward, I was ride or die with Nintendo for life. It's a sickness. I have fond memories of playing the Virtual Boy. But through all of that, I never turned my back on other platforms. When visiting my aunt, I'd be plopped down in front of the PC to try out whatever Sierra adventure game my aunt was hooked on. Whatever money floated my way as a child wound up either in the arcade machines at the local mall or at the video rental store. My friend circles in the 90s included kids on both sides of the console wars, so while we would have some heated debates on the merits of our preferred platforms, at the end of the day we were sitting down to play any game on any console we could get our hands on. As I got older, I was able to make my own money, which I then spent on expanding my console empire to Sega, Sony, and Microsoft. Through emulation, I was able to experience even more games on even more consoles, and along the way, I played anything and everything regardless of genre. Some genres I fell in love with, others I'm a little less interested in, but there is no genre of game that I categorically dislike. Nintendo, however, has always stood at the head of the pack for me. At all points of my life, after first laying eyes on Super Mario Bros., the question of my favorite games of all time would invariably include a Nintendo game. When Lord Sakurai descended from the heavens to bestow upon us a new genre fusion in the form of the Nintendo fanboy's ultimate wet dream, the question of my favorite games of all time would invariably include Smash Bros. And with each new entry, regardless of whatever faults some of them may have had, I only grew to love Smash more and more. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is my favorite game of all time. I don't need to tell you what Smash is and has become. Smash is now a celebration of gaming as a whole, and Smash Ultimate has embraced this by becoming all video games. So, Smash. I chose it because it's my favorite game, the ultimate Nintendo game, and the ultimate celebration of all gaming. It also happens to have been developed by Namco, creators of the first video game I ever played, whose star is a playable fighter in the game. And I chose to do this now because it's episode 9, and I always turn the CPU opponents up to 9. Seriously, that's it. That was the deciding factor. Listen, all I'm saying is nobody better be surprised by what game I cover in episode 47. Smash Bros. Created a new genre when it was made, one that has only in the last decade been referred to as platform fighter rather than Smash clone. Seriously, when PlayStation All-Star Battle Royale was presented to everyone, I remember plenty of people referring to it as Sony Smash, and I don't remember anyone using the term platform fighter. Now, I'm not bothering to research that to verify my memory is in line with reality. It's entirely possible that someone, perhaps Sony marketing themselves even, used the platform fighter term somewhere, but the point still stands. Nobody remembers Sony Smash. Wait, no, what was the point? Anyway, the point is, I want to talk about Smash, but what I originally wanted to say ended up going into such a long, unrelated tangent that I gave up on the original idea for now to focus exclusively on answering the pointless question of how many characters are actually in Smash Ultimate. A seemingly simple question, just look at the roster on the official site and you'll see Sora listed as fighter number 82. But then you might notice Samus is number 4 and Dark Samus is 4E. Steve and Alex are listed as just 77, unlike Pyra and Mithra, who get 79 and 80. That's fine if we're asking effectively in terms of playstyles how many characters there are, but I want to know how many actual unique characters are represented in Smash's roster. To find the answer, we need to define exactly what counts as a unique character. Any character that is split on the roster into multiple slots is only one character, so Dr. Mario is the same Mario as Mario, and Zero Suit Samus is the same Samus as Samus. Therefore, those 4 slots on the roster only equate to 2 unique characters. When Zelda was introduced in Melee, she was based on her Ocarina of Time counterpart, who appeared in much of her own games as Sheik. As such, in Melee, both Zelda and Sheik would be counted as the same character. Since Zelda in Ultimate is the one from A Link to the Past, and Sheik has only ever appeared in Ocarina of Time, these are 2 distinct princesses, just as the 3 Links are distinct heroes. Adult Link has a Fierce Deity Link skin, but this is also available in Breath of the Wild for Link to dress up as, so it doesn't make him a different Link. Besides, even if it did make this specific skin the Link from Majora's Mask, he's right over there. Dark Link falls into the same category. All three Links have a Dark Link skin, but only Adult Link canonically has a costume of Dark Link. Still, none of the Links are referred to as Dark Link when using the skin, so I think it's fair to say that in all three cases, it's the same Link simply wearing a costume. Quick aside, the conductor on the Spirit Tracks level is technically a separate Link from all the other Links on the roster, yes, even Toon Link, but he'll still be replaced by Alfonso if any of the Links are fighting on the stage. So yeah, the characters have alternate costumes and skins. In most cases, these are simple recolors that don't constitute different characters, but then Bowser Jr. comes along and sneaks in all 7 Koopalings onto the roster. He's not the only one. Olimar comes with Alf, and Steve comes with Alex, Zombie, and Enderman. Hero from Dragon Quest is represented by Luminary from 11, Erdrick from 3, Solo from 4, and 8 from 8. Then there are the myriad of characters that have male and female forms. How do we count them? For example, Byleth is still the same character serving the same role with the same relationships at the beginning of Fire Emblem Three Houses, no matter which gender they are. I don't think there's any way to change gender identities mid-game, but I could be wrong about that. I never actually finished it, or any Fire Emblem game for that matter. So male Byleth and female Byleth are the same character, but they would never exist in the same universe. Then we also have Wii Fit Trainer, whose distinct indistinctness means the natural inclination is to consider the male and female trainers separate characters. Boy and girl Inklings are all running around together in Splatoon, and Animal Crossing villagers can also be seen wandering around aimlessly together. Fuck it, let's count all male and female counterparts as individual characters. That is, all male skins are one character and all female skins are another. We'll do that across the board for the 3 Fire Emblem characters this applies to, and the Wii Fit Trainer. For Avatar characters with no canonical names, however, we'll mark every alternate costume as a unique character. That means Villager adds 8, Inkling adds 8, and Pokemon Trainer adds 8. Yes, we are counting the Pokemon Trainer because even though you don't play as the trainer directly, the trainer is still a character that you choose on the character select screen. And the biggest reason we're counting each costume as an individual character is mostly because of skin tones. It's hard to argue that the lighter male and the darker male are the same person without asking some uncomfortable questions that definitely don't show up in their respective canons. Which brings us nicely around to the Pokemon. Pikachu, Jigglypuff, Squirtle, these are species names. I rarely use the species names as the given name when I'm playing Pokemon, and I doubt there are many players that could honestly say differently. Each Pokemon is unique, further enforced by special variables generated and attached to every single Pokemon that affect their abilities and personalities and other variables, and honestly, Pokemon can get a little too complex for me at the highest level sometimes. I just like the cute creatures in the solid RPG foundation. But that's okay, because the point is made, and with skin tones being a thing on almost every Pokemon character, even if some of the recolors have never been seen within Pokemon canon, I'm comfortable declaring every Pokemon skin a unique character. Yes, even Pichu wearing different hats, each one is a different Pichu. Which means we don't need to point out that the spiky-eared Pichu is a specially unique Pichu, or that the last 2 Pikachu costumes are female, but not the same female, because Pikachu Libre is a special cosplay Pikachu whose tail is black. But what about Mewtwo? Isn't there canonically only one Mewtwo? No. So we add 8 on the board for every single Pokemon. But what about Yoshi? Simple, it's the same thing. Yoshi is the species name, and even though some Yoshis are simply named Yoshi, the existence of Boshi shows that Yoshi is always the species name, and not always the given name. Besides, different colors. That means different Yoshis, and the same logic applies to Piranha Plant. Now let's look at duos. These are obviously 2 characters. Banjo and Kazooie, Pyra and Mythra, Joker and Arsene, and the Ice Climbers, Nana and Popo, are the easy ones. The Duck Hunt duo can be argued to actually be 3 characters, with the Zapper being integral to their moveset, but the Zapper isn't a character, and the person wielding the Zapper is the player of the game, who is an integral part of every moveset in the game. So the duck and the dog count as 2 distinct characters. But they're duck and dog, so they don't have given names. Does that mean every duck and dog are distinct? As much as I love the idea of more dogs, there is canonically only 1 dog in Duck Hunt. There are multiple ducks, but since you're only bringing 1 duck into battle in Smash as the 1 canonical dog, we're going to count the recolors as nothing more than that. Sorry, it's just 1 duck and 1 dog. Swinging back towards the Mario universe, we've got Mario. Yeah, Mario is a duo. Mario's down special is Flood, and canonically Flood talks way too much and is thus a character. Rosalina and Luma is a bit of a strange one. There is only 1 Rosalina, but Luma is the species name, and there are 6 possible Luma that can join Rosalina. I think it's fair to consider each color a unique character, but if you lose the yellow Luma and get another yellow Luma, that doesn't count as a new character. That's the same Luma that just respawned. That's how we think of it when Pikachu or Jigglypuff die and respawn, and that logic should apply across the board. This brings us to an even more interesting situation with Olimar. We already mentioned Alf as an alternate, but what about the Pikmin? They're characters as well, but how do we count them? Each Pikmin can die, and then another Pikmin can be plucked to replace it, so we effectively have infinite Pikmin. Well, if we're only counting the Lumas the same ones that keep respawning, the same should apply to the Pikmin. When a yellow Pikmin dies, it respawns in the ground, ready to be plucked. Olimar has 5 types of Pikmin available: red, yellow, blue, white, and purple. These are obviously unique characters, but since Olimar can have 3 Pikmin out at a time and it is possible to get 3 of the same color, I'm going to say that Olimar has 3 of each type, meaning 15 characters come packaged in with Olimar, except it's actually 17 because he also has 2 winged Pikmin, bringing the grand total of characters selectable in this slot to 19. What about the other characters that can utilize sentient beings as tools? Lucas has the Rope Snake. That's a character. Lucas has a twin brother named Klaus who appears as Lucas's second skin, but the game still calls him Lucas, so it just becomes a sad reminder that makes me cry. If you know, you know. Peach and Daisy can both use Toad as a shield, and since Daisy's Toad is blue and Peach's is red, that's 2 more characters to add to the total. Peach and Daisy can also pull Bob-ombs and Mr. Saturns out of the ground, and those are clearly characters. However, there's no difference between the ones pulled by Daisy versus Peach, so Bob-omb and Mr. Saturn each count as a single character that is attached to both princesses. But of course, the move where these characters are found is the one that usually turns up turnips. These turnips have faces, so I'm a bit on the fence here, but ultimately, I don't think these can count as characters. They never do anything, even in their canonical appearances. I don't think having a face is enough to qualify someone as a character, especially in the Mario universe. It should at least display some sort of behavior. Motherfucking Bowser Jr. is back to challenge the limits of what constitutes a character with his Mecha Koopa. Rarely shown acting like anything more than a wind-up toy, nevertheless, it still has more personality than the Turnips showcase. But then I found a Mecha Koopa in Mario Party Advance that talks, so yeah, it's a character. I'm only counting it as a single character across all the Koopalings, though, because it's no different no matter who spawns it. Their clown cars, on the other hand, are clearly just vehicles with faces and not characters. The faces animate, which is at least a little better than the Turnips, but they're never seen acting without a pilot in the Mario games, so they aren't characters. Little shit trying to stack the votes, but he won't get into double digits on my watch. King DDD has Gordo, and Gordo is cool, so Gordo is a character. But you see now why I was on the fence about the Turnips, right? Gordo can move on his own accord in the Kirby games, though, which is more than Turnips ever did for anybody. So Pac-Man is a tiny nightmare. He's filled with ghosts. 4 of them to be exact, but he also brings with him this bonus fruit attack, which contains a Galaxian, a spaceship. Now, the spaceship itself is not a character, but its pilot could be. And since this ship can be thrown and then it flies on its own, it's reasonable to think that there could be a pilot in there. But is that enough? The pilot is never named or seen. For all we know, the ship could be a drone. As such, I cannot in good conscience include the Galaxian as a character, which is super helpful when we move on to taunts. Oh yeah, we're going all the way in. Pac-Man's up taunt is Namco Roulette, in which Pac-Man shows just how much power he commands around Namco by holding its IP in his hands. Right off the bat, we can knock several representatives off the character list. Galaxip, the player ship in Galaxian, Fighter, the player ship in Galaga, Fighter, the player ship in Bosconian, Salvalu, the player ship in Xevious, and/or Genesis, an enemy mothership in Xevious, Hypership, a secret player ship in Gaplus, and My Car, the player car in Rally X, can all be eliminated. Turn to Blue from Pac-Man is just one of the 4 ghosts we've already counted, so it's also eliminated. The entire rest of the Namco Roulette, however, is composed of unique characters. King from King and Balloon, Puka from Dig Dug, Mappy from Mappy, Top Cup from Libble Rabble, Gil from Tower of Druaga, Clovis from Dragon Buster, Runner from Metrocross, Packet the friendly alien from Baraduke, Red Baron the bird piloting a biplane from Sky Kid, Valkyrie from Valkyrie no Densetsu, Heihachi Mishima from Tekken, Donchen the anthropomorphic Taiko Drum from Taiko no Tatsujin, and the Prince of All Cosmos from Katamari are all unique characters. Add the 2 fairies from Pac-Land and Pac's Down taunt, and Pac-Man comes as a package consisting of 20 characters. Pac-Man isn't the only one whose taunts need to be considered. A few select characters have what are called smash taunts, in which you press down taunt for a single frame when on specific stages. These will initiate Easter egg conversations with other characters from that character's or stage's series. The Star Fox series kicked off this trend in Melee, and in Ultimate you can initiate conversations that include Crystal, Slippy, Peppy, Panther, and Leon. That's 5 additional characters. There's obviously crossover in who appears in which Easter egg conversation, so I'll just add that these characters to Fox for simplicity's sake. Snake can strike up conversations with Colonel Campbell, Otacon, Mei Ling, and Slippy. So yeah, only 3 additional characters this time, but that's not bad. Pit is the only character who can initiate the Kid Icarus Easter egg conversations, but Dark Pit and Palutena still feature in them from time to time. Prom also makes an appearance, but for unique new characters, we've only got Viridi and Alucard. It's interesting that Alucard is getting counted with Pit, as he only appears as an assist trophy otherwise, and we're not counting them as they're not unique to any particular character's moveset. We're playing this game with items off, so to speak. And we're not even close to finishing, because we need to go back to Mario once again and look at his side taunt. Cappy. Another character, you fucking guy. That puts Mario at 3 characters. Dr. Mario, being Mario, is one of the few characters being marked at 0, as Mario has already been counted. You'd think Dr. Mario would come with some of the viruses from the Dr. Mario game in some of his taunts or his victory animations, but no, he just comes with pills, so no characters. Luigi has the good sense to leave other characters at home, only bringing his Poltergust from Luigi's Mansion 3. The Poltergust is made by this little creepy weirdo who also made the Flood and Bowser Jr.'s Paintbrush. I've only played the first two Luigi's Mansion games at this point, so I had to consult the wiki on whether or not the Luigi's Mansion 3 model had been given sentience like the Flood, but it doesn't seem like it has. It is a storage device for Luigi, but that appears to be nothing more than some goo Luigi can put his own consciousness into, so it can't be considered a unique character. This leaves Luigi as the only character coming into the fight when you choose Luigi. Similarly, Bowser and Wario fight alone when selected. Peach and Daisy were both shown to bring 3 others into the fight, but since 2 of those are being counted as the same character across both movesets, we'll put Peach at 4 characters and Daisy will sit at just 2. Rosalina and Luma and Bowser Jr. are sitting pretty at 7 and 9 respectively, but Rosalina can spawn in a Grand Star during the Final Smash, and Bowser Jr. transforms into Shadow Mario during his. That's right, we need to look at Final Smashes as well, but in this case it's incredibly easy. The Grand Star is clearly not a character in Mario Galaxy, and Shadow Mario is literally just Bowser Jr. in disguise. No new characters there. Piranha Plant brings Petey Piranha along for the fight during its Final Smash, adding another character to the Piranha roster. Yoshi, however, Yoshi's Final Smash is the biggest reason why I should have never embarked on this quest. Look at this shit. Look at it. So I went through it frame by frame and counted the Yoshis running down the hill in the Stampede. I considered the first Yoshis we see to be the first Yoshis of the Stampede. I counted about 60% of the way through the Final Smash, where the foreground Yoshis who are considered already counted started to obscure the background. I got to about 100 Yoshis at that point, and considering all the Yoshis out of frame and those that are remaining to be counted, I decided that an estimate of a total of 200 Yoshis is fair enough. Yeah. Now let's look at it again with Yoshi as the victim. Do you notice anything? The stampeding Yoshis are much bigger than the playable Yoshi. That means these 200 Yoshis are completely different from our 8 fighter Yoshis. Total number of characters, an estimated 208. Finishing off characters within the greater Mario universe, Donkey Kong, Diddy Kong, and King K. Rool all fight alone. K. Rool does raise his fortress up from DK64, which was full of enemies in the original game, but we don't see any of these characters here, so there's no telling if there is actually anyone else in there. For that reason, all 3 DK reps are a simple 1 character each. We've got 6 representatives of the Legend of Zelda series, and while we established that the Links are 3 distinct characters who have no alts that can count as characters in their own right, that doesn't mean the Links fight alone. The Master Sword is their primary weapon, and is imbued with the spirit of Fi. While she doesn't do much in Smash, she does enough even in just her Master Sword form in the newer Zelda games that I think it's fair to consider her a character. There's only 1 Master Sword, so despite whatever small visual differences may exist between the different Links, they're all holding the exact same sword. So the Master Sword will only be counted with Adult Link. Now, the child incarnations of Link both come equipped with a taunt that includes a fairy. The fairies are quite different from each other, so we're counting each one as an individual character. Not only that, Toon Link also has 2 victory poses where he tries to catch a pig. The pig appears to always be the same, so that's 1 pig. Bringing our Links to 2 characters for Link, 2 characters for Young Link, and 3 characters for Toon Link. Sheik is an easy 1 character, but Zelda has the Phantom. That's an easy 2 characters. But something of note is that this power canonically comes from the Zelda from Spirit Tracks, whose spirit possesses these massive suits of armor throughout the game, which means that in Smash, it only makes sense that this Zelda is calling upon the Spirit Track Zelda in her down special and in one of their victory poses. This character is not just 2 characters, but 2 Zeldas. Oh, and Ganondorf fittingly fights alone. On to the 4 slots representing the Metroid franchise, one with historically few characters to draw from until more recent entries began fleshing out the story. This is reflected in the roster getting 2 new fighters for this game, bringing the total number of characters from Metroid up to 3. The Kirby franchise gets 3 roster slots, and Kirby and Meta Knight both show up alone, but King Dedede is a diva and brings his entire fucking entourage. Not just the Gordo in his pocket, which we've already discussed, but 4 Waddle Dees. This one in his victory screen is being counted as one of those initial Waddle Dees, and I thought his Final Smash might be an issue because of the crowd, but there's no crowd that we can see. This is because in the original debut of Mass DDD and Kirby Superstar Ultra, Kirby fights him in an arena devoid of spectators other than Bandana Waddle Dee. Bandana Waddle Dee is a separate Waddle Dee from the ones in DDD's intro and could be reasonably expected to be out there somewhere, but without any actual evidence that he's out there, I can't count him. That puts DDD at a reasonable 6 characters. The Star Fox franchise features 3 fighters that don't fight alone. We've already covered all the characters in their special Star Fox Smash taunts, and those characters make a reappearance for each Final Smash. The game's seems to be representing different eras of Star Fox through its stages, with different Smash Taunt conversations available on each one. Ultimate didn't add any new Smash Taunt conversations to the Star Fox guys, so Wolf doesn't have a Smash Taunt on stages other than Lilac Cruise. The reason any of this is important is because the Star Fox and Star Wolf teams have different crews at different points in time, with Crystal being the one character in these Smash Taunt conversations who has been on both teams. This seems to be reflected in these Smash Taunt conversations, as Crystal will appear in Smash Taunts for Team Star Fox as well as for Team Star Wolf. This means that an argument can be made that the makeup of each team during the final smash is different depending on the stage. For Team Star Fox, this is pretty straightforward, as the fighter pilots on the team always consist of Fox, Slippy, and Falco. In Star Fox 64, Peppy is the fourth pilot, but in Star Fox Assault, he's too old and Crystal steps in as the fourth pilot. By Star Fox Command, the team is in shambles, and while Slippy and Falco eventually come back easily enough, Crystal is on Team Star Wolf and in a relationship with Panther, and even when I got her back on Team Star Fox, she always went back to Star Wolf and Panther in the end. I never got any endings where she stayed with Fox, but I assume there's at least one in there. My point isn't that Star Fox would make for a kick-ass animated show, which it totally would, but that in Star Fox 64, Star Wolf consisted of Wolf, Leon, Pigma, and Andrew. Andrew and Pigma leave the team in Assault, with Panther taking their place in Assault and Crystal being added to the team later on in Command. The answer of who exactly is sitting in these pilot seats during Wolf's final smash could mean a difference of two characters, so we'd better think this through. In Star Fox Assault, Star Wolf only has 3 pilots, but no matter what stage we play on, Wolf's final smash has 4 pilots. This lends credence to the idea that the team in the final smash is actually the same across all stages, and since Wolf can only interact with the version of his crew without Andrew and Pigma, I'm going to assume that the 3rd and 4th pilots are Panther and Crystal, regardless of what stage you're using this final smash on. At this point, it doesn't really matter whether the 4th Star Fox pilot is Peppy or Crystal. They're both characters in the game either way. We'll give Crystal to Wolf and give the rest to Fox so that we have 3 for Fox, 4 for Wolf, and 1 for Falco. There are 10 playable Pokemon in the Pokemon Trainer and Smash, and we've already established that each one is 8 individual characters. Seems simple enough, and considering no other Pokemon are ever featured in their entrances, their victory poses, or their final smashes, it all seems pretty simple. But Incineroar is nothing, if not a show-off. So he brought an entire fucking crowd of people to witness his final smash. In a way, counting the spectators should be easier and quicker than the Yoshi Stampede, since there is really only one frame that needs to be analyzed. But in another way entirely, it's actually even easier because we can just look up how large a standard WWE arena is, and what's this? Since 2007's WrestleMania 23 has been held exclusively in stadiums that typically have a seating capacity of at least 70,000 people or more. Thanks Wikipedia, sounds good enough for me. We can't possibly get an accurate count of how many people are in this crowd reasonably, and are going to have to estimate somewhere, so let's just go with that. Incineroar is 70,008 characters. Few things before we move on. Incineroar's final smash appears to take place in an arena different from the Punch-Out boxing ring level. Makes sense, the boxing ring level is not a wrestling match arena. The boxing ring level does not look like a 70,000 person arena, but Incineroar's final smash shows an arena in which the camera is pulled out further, the background is darker and devoid of prominent elements, and Incineroar being a wrestler lends me to believe this is a different arena and one that in the Pokemon universe likely has attendance levels similar to WWE shows. Finally moving on, Captain Falcon only brings his car with him, which is a cool car, but not a character. Ness and Lucas are up next, and I'm so glad because the Mother series are not only some of my all-time favorites in gaming ever, but the series is beautifully short and sweet, meaning I get a break from reading wikis. Like, I love the Star Fox series too, I played every game in the series, but I was cross-referencing Smash and Star Fox wikis after every sentence I wrote to ensure I hadn't made any huge mistakes. With the Mother series, it's simple. I mean, the story isn't necessarily entirely simple, but Ness has his friends and Lucas has his friends, and the two groups as we know them never interact. Ness brings his friends Paula and Pooh in to perform Starstorm, putting him at 3 characters. Lucas has the aforementioned Rope Snake, and for his basically identical final smash, he brings in Kumatora and Boney, putting him at 4 characters. In the case of the final smashes, the friends brought in generally all have more offensive PSI options than the main protagonists in their native games, but I think Boney is just here for moral support, which is awesome and he is a very good boy. Lucas rides into battle on a Mr. Saturn table, which is a table and not a character, and Ness has a Mr. Saturn on his shirt and one of his alt costumes, but that's a design on a shirt and not an actual Mr. Saturn, so Ness stays at 3 and Lucas stays at 4. God, I want this to fucking end. Ice climbers climb ice in Ice Climber, which is the same thing whether you play the NES or arcade versions. The ice climbers, Nana and Popo, reach the stage by hitching a ride with the Condor, who is definitely a pterodactyl. He reappears during the final smash along with a polar bear and a mountain. The mountain can move left and right while it spins, and while it's a beautiful and moving display of artistry and storytelling through dance, it doesn't make it a character. 4 characters. Oh good, Fire Emblem, everyone's favorite selection of characters in Smash. Personally, I like them, but I could personally live without Lucina, and nobody asked for Chrom. I already made a decision about avatar characters who can be male or female, counting each gender as a separate character for the sake of simplicity. I'm a very casual fan of the Fire Emblem games, never having completed the handful of them I have actually played, so if there's some nuance to a character's gender identity somewhere in the series, you can count or not count each gender rep however you like. All I know is that Byleth was a static choice at the beginning of her game, and this guy Byleth is a weird alternate universe anomaly. Apart from these gender variations, all the Fire Emblem characters fight alone with the exception of 2, Robin and Byleth. Robin just brings in Chrom for their final smash, so that doesn't really count, but Byleth brings in Sothis.png and becomes the only Fire Emblem character to reach 3 characters. Mr. Game & Watch is in many ways barely a character, but in that he represents so many different games, some of which did have named characters, he's kind of a lot of characters. In fact, many of his movesets have him changing into the various characters across many different Game & Watch games. While some of these characters, such as Stanley the Bugman, Spitball Sparky, and the Octopus from the game Octopus, are entities that can be reasonably considered separate from Mr. Game & Watch, most playable characters from the Game & Watch series don't have names or distinguishing features. The Chef, the Flagman, the Judge, they're just the names of the games they're from and could, for all we know, be the same character, that character being Mr. Game & Watch. I think that's the intent, but with Mr. Game & Watch literally turning into these different forms, when we see Stanley the Bugman, is that truly Stanley the Bugman, or just Mr. Game & Watch's impression of Stanley the Bugman? Because Stanley exists outside of Game & Watch, it's unlikely the real Stanley would look like this in Smash. In fact, in past games where he has appeared as a trophy, he didn't look like this. But then, who are these guys in his Up Special? Are they just extensions of Mr. Game & Watch, or are they 2 new guys? Are the fish coming out of the fishbowl unique entities? How does Mr. Game & Watch's moveset actually function? Considering so many of his attacks have him changing form in some way, and he's essentially the singular catch-all representative of the entire Game & Watch library, I think an argument could be made that all of his moves are transformations, and any entities which appear during these moves are merely just part of the illusion of Mr. Game & Watch's transformative powers. Sounds good enough to me. 1 character. Kid Icarus. Dark Pit. Alone. Palutena. Alone. Pit. 2 motherfucking unicorns. I thought I was going to have some trouble with Olimar's final smash, as you can't really see everything that's happening at the bottom of the screen, but the Bulborbs jump up and down during the final smash. They go almost completely straight up and down, 2 at a time, 5 times, each one appearing in a slightly different spot. I think I can count each appearance of a Bulborb as a unique one, and considering they essentially cover the whole screen, I think it's fair to count all 10 as the entire group. So with what we went over about his Pikmin and Alf, Olimar clocks in at a final score of 29 characters. Rob is a robot. You know who Rob is. He started as a real robot and was key to getting NES onto American store shelves in 1985, so his status as a video game icon is indisputable. He was only ever compatible with 2 games, which are actually better played without Rob's assistance, but he's had so many cameo appearances throughout Nintendo's history that I wasn't able to find a complete and definitive list of them, and had to remind myself that this wasn't the question I was trying to answer in order to keep myself from going down what could have been a very deep rabbit hole. This entire script was supposed to be something like a 6-paragraph diversion in a much different video. Why am I me? Rob is 1 character. Yeah, NES version, Famicom version, all that, but even in real life, they were simply alternate colored versions of the same character. And while Rob 64 is based on Rob, that's a different character, so yeah, he's 1. Villager is Spoon Hands.
I've got spoons for hands!
And Isabelle is a doggy. Isabelle changes up the moveset in some dramatic enough ways to keep her from being classified as an Echo Fighter, but those moves don't bring in any characters that aren't also there for Villager, so she's going to remain at 1 character. Villager's already 8 characters by virtue of the rules established so very, very, very long ago, so we need to look at his moveset to find the rest. Lloyd the Gyroid is a helper gyroid that has been part of the Animal Crossing series since the beginning. I'm uncertain if gyroids are alive or not, as they seem kind of robotic, but being a robot never stopped anyone from being a character. Throw them on the pile. And in the final smash, a raccoon infestation. 3 more characters. Villager's getting a 12. I thought Wii Fit Trainer was going to be simple. There's a male and a female version. We've already established the alts are just the same male and female wearing different clothes, so 2 characters, right? What more is there? The Wii fucking balance board. Now, you might be looking at this and wondering what the problem is, and to that I say look at the fucking Smash Wiki, and you'll see the description they give to the Wii Fit Trainer's entrance. The balance board jumps up and cheerfully waves goodbye. I'm looking at this animation and I'm just not seeing it. It looks like it just floats up and disappears. No cheerful waving, right? It's not just me, is it? But more importantly, this leaves me wondering if I should be looking into whether the Wii Balance Board has ever been animated or given dialogue anywhere in the last decade and a half of Nintendo games, which I'm almost certain it has. I mean, Rob started off as a real thing before becoming a game character, so why not the Balance Board? However, in the interest of gaining some semblance of control of my life back, I proposed the classic gambit known as Fuck That. Rob is a character sitting on the roster screen, and Balance Board makes a brief cameo in a single animation and displays no signs of characterization. This Balance Board is representing the real-life Balance Board, which is not a character. Wii Fit Trainer gets a 2. Little Mac is thankfully very simple. Gigamac is a transformation that doesn't represent a different character in the canon, and Doc Lewis appears in the victory screen animations, 2 characters. The Xenoblade Gang has also been nice enough to keep it simple, which is not typical of a Monolith Soft production. Shulk brought along 3 friends for his final smash, and Pyra and Mithra brought along their husband, I guess. I only played the first game and didn't finish it, so I have no idea what their deal is, but I do know how to count higher than Valve, and that's 3 characters. Duck Hunt, the duo that is only 2 characters so far, pumped themselves up significantly with their final smash. A flock of 8 ducks starts the move off before all 5 wild gunmen show up to partake in America's favorite school time activity. The cardboard cutouts from Hogan's Alley are also there, but they're not exactly characters, so we don't care. Ducks also fly across the screen again, but I'm counting these as the same ducks from before. Still, 15 characters is not bad. Inkling is 8 because of the alts, and Min Min is 7 because of her final smash. Snake is still one of my favorite characters in Ultimate, even if he has a very canonically inaccurate ass. Apparently they needed to take some cake from Samus and Snake in order to sculpt the perfect Bayonetta, so it's fine. Snake still has a support team in his smash taunt, but as always he goes into the field alone. He has a drone, which is not a character, and he has some support missiles for a final smash. The machine firing the missiles is not a character, and the person firing the missiles is the player, so no additional characters from the final smash. 4. Sonic, why are you so much lamer than you should be? Mega Man is a cool guy because he has a cool dog. He also brought along his brother, his ancestors, and that guy from work he doesn't really like. 8 characters. We've already established Pac-Man is at 20, and that fairy in his victory screen appears to be the same one from his down taunt. Unsurprisingly, Ryu and Ken stay true to their roots and fight alone. You know, Street Fighter was created by Takashi Nishiyama and marked the debut of both Ryu and Ken. However, Nishiyama would leave Capcom for SNK and go on to create Fatal Fury, the debut of Terry. That means that Nishiyama is the only non-Nintendo person to have created 2 franchises represented on the Smash roster. Tetsuya Nomura may not have created the Final Fantasy franchise, but he has just as many reps on the board as Nishiyama in terms of characters created. Cloud, Sephiroth, and Sora are no strangers to each other either, as Cloud and Sephiroth both appear in the Kingdom Hearts franchise. And as reps for both Square and Disney respectively, it's not a huge surprise to see that they all fight alone. I mean, Square didn't even allow for more than 2 songs to be added to Smash 4 when Cloud was DLC. Geno has never been allowed to be added to the Smash roster outside of a Mii costume, and apparently getting Disney to allow Sora to appear at all was a minor miracle. I'm getting off track, however. Back on topic, as I said, everyone fights alone. Sora was allowed to have a Mickey Mouse keychain, which is a nice detail, but it isn't the actual Mickey Mouse, so it's not a character. Sephiroth does pose a unique problem with his final smash, as it features the destruction of Earth. Given that there are a billion-tejillion living things on the planet, how do we possibly count this? Do we count this at all? What constitutes a character? We have animals, plants, robots, and shapes on the list so far. Being named or even visible hasn't been a requirement. Come on, we're almost at the end. We can do this. We can use an objective, albeit arbitrary, set of rules to find a number. What are these rules? Do characters only exist in fiction? Can real people be characters? Does character require performance? How much? Is it just in the masks we wear? Does it require utter transformation? Can character be truth? Is there truth?
Grandma Betty were here. She's asleep. She's asleep.
reincarnated multiple times.
Yeah, no, this can't count. If the pilot of the Galaxian didn't count, we can't possibly count the life on the planet. We don't see anyone and nobody says anything. This did throw into question my Incineroar decision, but I think the fact that the majority of characters in question are there actively cheering on the one performing the final smash, while nobody on that planet is cheering Sephiroth on, is something to be considered. Also, the fact that all these people watching Incineroar had to actively leave their homes to appear in the final smash, while nobody here is far enough away from their homes to even be seen in Sephiroth's, I think it's fair to consider the matter settled. Bayonetta! She has 2 demon helpers, Madama Butterfly and Gamora, and she can turn into a bunch of bats. Since that bunch of bats are still technically Bayonetta herself, they don't count as individual characters. So Bayonetta gets a 3. The Belmonts didn't bring any friends to the party, but they did bring a coffin, which is pretty fucking metal. Joker keeps things from getting boring. Of course, Arsene is there, but Morgana is also there in his taunts and his victory animations. His victory animations in Final Smash also feature his friends Anne, Ryuji, Haru, Makoto, Yusuke, and Futaba, who only has a few lines of dialogue and no on-screen appearance. I suppose the only debate to be had is on whether Arsene counts or not, as he is the personification of the rebellious side of Joker's soul, making him an extension of Joker, but he is still a distinct entity rather than the straight transformation from one to the other we see with other characters, so I'm counting him. 9 characters for Joker. Hero is uncharacteristic of Square Enix reps being loaded up with unique identities. Apart from the 4 playable heroes, the remaining 7 show up for the final smash. You of course can't have Dragon Quest without the iconic slime, and while there is only one in Hero's down taunt, that slime is joined by 2 friends in one of Hero's victory poses. Simple enough, right? 11 heroes, 3 slimes, 14 characters. But no, you're forgetting someone very important. Dragon Quest VIII fans know. Banjo and Kazooie are accompanied by the Jinjonator and 4 Jinjos for the final smash, and every time I see it I want a full modern remake of Banjo-Kazooie with shiny new graphics and music. Anyway, this case seems simple, but there's an easy to miss 8th character included. In one of the victory animations, Banjo is holding a Jiggy. Jiggies are sentient beings as shown in both of the original Banjo games, and that stands for all of them, even this one. We finally come to Steve, who obviously brings us Alex, Zombie, and Enderman as playable alts. It has become standard to not count the alts as the same entities that appear in the final smash, so the zombies we see in the final smash are their own unique entities. I scoured the background for any Endermen lurking in the dark, but couldn't find any. Apart from zombies, we have creepers and nothing else. I mean, it makes sense. They already had the zombie model, and the creeper is too iconic to Minecraft to exclude, so it gets put in. It helps that the purpose of the final smash is to make a massive explosion, so creepers just make sense as well. Skeletons, bats, spiders, slimes, or other mobs wouldn't really add anything to the idea of Big Boom, and would possibly increase the licensing fees, so it's an easy decision. So how many mobs are in the House of Boom cutscene? 8. Almost missed the last one though, as it only appears behind the other 7, very briefly and very faintly. This brings Steve to a final count of 12. Should mention that a creeper appears in one of the victory screens, but we've already established a precedent on how to consider this, and we've been trapped in this hellish nightmare of a video for way longer than I ever intended this to be, so we all know by now that this creeper could be one of the ones in the final smash. Everything respawns in Smash, so an explosive self-destruction isn't the end of a character. 12 characters. This feels like a bit of a weight off getting through the entire roster like this, but I save the potentially worst for last. Mies. Sword Fighter, Brawler, and Gunner can take on the appearance of practically anyone. There are, of course, licensed costumes like Cuphead and Sans, and it's not difficult to make a John Wick, a Jack Sparrow, or even Nipples. Everyone can be in Smash. You, former execs, people who died way too young, and even sexual predators who possibly died not young enough. So with 3 slots on the roster that represent such an overabundance of possible characters, how can we possibly count this? That's something I've honestly been not looking forward to having to figure out the entire time I was writing the script. But now that we're here, I've realized something. As much as I want to say that Goemon is in this game, he's really not. This isn't a creeper. This is the Mii Brawler wearing a creeper costume. And this Mii isn't me. It's a Mii, allowing me to represent myself in Smash, so for as customizable as the Miis are, they're always fundamentally the same character. The Mii Brawler, Gunner, and Sword Fighter really can only be counted as one character, each. And we've done it. We've completed the entire roster. As per our rules, we are only counting the characters attached to those who are playable in Ultimate, so while Toon Link's pig might not actually do anything during the fight, he is getting counted while assist trophies like Waluigi are not. We're not doing spirits either. The line had to be drawn somewhere. And looking at that line, we see that there is actually one more playable character. In World of Light, there is a single moment where you get to play as Master Hand. He may not be a part of the main roster, but he is technically playable, and thus counts as our final character. Now that truly is it. That is, as far as I know, all of the characters that fit our very dumb criteria. All we need to do is add up the numbers and finally receive the answer to our pointless question that somehow managed to derail my life for weeks. How many characters are there in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate's playable roster? 70,575. You're welcome.